Welcome to the RockCreek Climate Summit. Today, we try to answer some of the most critical questions in the climate discussion. How can we marshal the financial resources to finally tackle climate change? And where do investors find opportunities that meet their return objectives and shift capital flows to a low-carbon, climate-resilient, sustainable economy? Everywhere we look, climate news is grim. There are droughts in South Africa for the last 3 years. Historic floods in Europe devastating entire towns. Melting Antarctic ice sheets that could raise sea levels as much as 8.5 inches by the end of the century. Weeks-long record heat waves in the western United States causing fires so destructive that the smoke obscures mountains 2 states away and covers New York and Washington in haze. But Andrew Steer, the head of the Bezos Earth Fund, who we will hear from today, not from space, but here on Earth, has a saying, "Don't be scared by what's going on, although it is scary." There is hope and there are solutions, but they're not easy. The World Resources Institute has detailed the need for radical change, roughly a halving of carbon emissions each decade through 2050. This is a difficult challenge and a large opportunity. IFC estimates that the Paris Agreement helped open 23 trillion in opportunities for climate-smart investments by the end of the decade, just in emerging markets. Globally, we'll need to invest more than $1 trillion per year in mitigation, adaptation, and solving underlying climate issues. Conservatively, that means more than 50 trillion of investments by 2050, just in climate change, not to mention air and water quality, drought and flooding mitigation, zero waste efforts, food scarcity, and many other areas. The economics of the last century told us that systematic radical change would be expensive. It would cost jobs. It could slow growth. 2 decades into this century, we know that's not true, quite the opposite, in fact. Investments in legacy fuels and industries are now costlier, riskier, and less dynamic than many of the climate-smart solutions we have today, let alone what we will see tomorrow. Exchange-traded funds built on ESG themes attracted a record inflow last year. 85% of American investors and 95% of millennial investors say they're interested in sustainable investing. Over the past several years, I've spoken about this economic reality with leaders in government, global investors, entrepreneurs, researchers, and development experts. They told me again and again that they all want to be part of the solution. And some crucial questions still do not have clear answers. Where do we find investments that accelerate climate action? Where can investors generate the returns they need to meet their objectives? That's what we're here to answer today. We know that no single government, company, multilateral, pension fund, sovereign fund, endowment, foundation, university, or investor can solve the climate crisis on their own. The scale is too immense, and the cost of failure is too high for any single entity to tackle it alone. Today, we will talk to leaders across this challenge about where the solutions are, how to marshal capital, and the best ways to drive systemic, dynamic, critical change. We will hear about policies at the federal and state level with White House National Climate Advisor Gina McCarthy and Senator Ed Markey. We will discuss state-level investments with New York State Controller Tom DiNapoli and Laura Tyson. Impact investor Gene Case will talk about how youth and entrepreneurs are taking on climate change. Manish Papna, the incoming head of the NRDC, will interview the UN's high-level climate champions ahead of the COP26 Glasgow meetings in November. And Gillian Tett, chair of the Financial Times editorial board, will interview leaders at some of the largest foundations to tell us how they integrate the missions of their organizations with the investments they make with their endowments. Thought leaders and allocators of capital, Britt Harris and Tim Bass, will explain where they see opportunities for good returns and lasting change in the transition economy. The The 21st century climate-smart economy must work for everyone, but right now, that is simply not the case. Here in the US, residents of poorer zip codes suffer harsher climate injustices. Take Lowndes County, Alabama, for example, a predominantly black county just outside of the state capital. A lack of affordable septic systems means children often play next to raw sewage, which has led to increased cases of hookworm, a preventable tropical disease. Climate justice researcher Catherine Flowers, who studied poor climate-impacted areas, will speak today with Carrie Dugan, a RockCreek advisor and former White House climate advisor, about putting equity at the center of climate investments. And we'll talk with the heads of some of the climate-smart companies in which RockCreek has invested, Appeal and Generate. At RockCreek, we are not only investing in innovative companies, but also in companies solving challenges, like rehabilitating unused farms for renewable energy projects in rural areas of the South, as well as in emerging economies. Since our founding, RockCreek has prioritized sustainable climate-smart investments, and we are continuing to partner with investors looking for new opportunities that accelerate climate action. Some of us worked on investments in renewable energy and climate-smart transitions at the World Bank and other institutions for over 20 years. We don't think there has ever been a better time to invest in the climate-smart future. There has never been better opportunities to integrate the mission of an organization with the returns they need. I hope today's discussion can help build the roadmap to harness this transformative technological and economic moment to make this change a reality. This summit, I hope, will be one step in ratcheting up our global ambition to build a 21st century climate-smart, inclusive economy that works for all people and our planet.